Hi, good morning. We are about to work on our breeding bench and try to figure out how to prepare the flowers to create hybrids. In previous videos, we have discussed the need to sanitize the greenhouse. So when I came into the greenhouse today, I put my feet into the foot bath and I made sure that it was um, well covered so that I didn't bring anything in. And now I'm going to make sure I alcohol my hands in order to make sure that I don't spray anything to the plant. So alcohol my hands, always good practice. Make sure that everything is sanitized. So two objectives today is to understand the coating on our ribbons that we have in here, and also to learn how to emasculate flowers to ensure that they are the correct parent for the crosses that we want to do. If we didn't emasculate them, take off the male parts, then there would be a chance that that plant would self-pollinate and not produce the hybrid that we're looking for. So first things first, we are going to talk about the ribbon. So any red polka dotted ribbon, that means that's our pollen plant. You notice we have the spoon on there, and that's for another lesson later on to explain how to collect the pollen for making the actual crosses. Anything with a purple ribbon means that we also need cells, so we can't take all of the pollen from the plant. It needs to be able to create fruit, self-pollinated fruit on its own because we need it for future experiments. If it's got a pink tag, which some of those in the back are showing, that means that there's a plant in here, but the pollen is not within this greenhouse. That we need to go out to the field to collect the pollen in order to put it onto there. And that'll become clear when we do the pollinating part, or actually pulling pollen, and you'll see why we need to make that distinction, because otherwise things get confusing. So for right now, we're going to talk about how to pick the flowers that you're going to emasculate first. Number one, this is a pollen plant, and I want to show it to you only because this is a flower that is too far gone. See, it's well opened. It has probably dropped its pollen already, and it's probably selfing this plant as we speak, and it'll eventually form a fruit that we'll be able to harvest and get seed from. We cannot do emasculating on this plant because it's too far gone. We wouldn't do it on the pollen plant anyway, but if we were to see a flower like this on one of the plants we are going to emasculate, this would be too far gone. We could not use this one. And anything that's going to show that much yellow is not good either. Even this one that's a little less open, those are still too far gone. So let me show you the kind that we are looking for on this plant, which is one of the ones we are looking for create hybrids on. So this one, if you can see, has got a small amount of yellow shine, just a tiny bit, just enough to show that it is about to release it's going to release its pollen within a day or so. So we're going to catch it before it does that. So there's two ways of doing this. One of the ways is to use forceps or tweezers, whatever you want to call them. And if you use tweezers or your nails, usually I just use my nails because they're not that long, but they're long enough. But our first goal is to take off the sepals, which are the green parts that are on the outside. We want to take all those off. And part of the reason why we are very particular about taking off the sepals is that by doing that, we know that this is going to be a emasculate. This one going to be one of our hybrids. If it wasn't taken off, we would think, oh, well, that must be a self. We don't want to collect that for a hybrid. That's kind of our indication that this is one of the hybrids that is going to come off this plant. So then we're going to take off the petals. The yellow parts here are the petals. Eventually they'll turn almost yellow-orange, but when they're in this stage, they're just this pale yellow. We're going to take off the petals. And then we are left with the stamens. So we're going to take those off. Stamens are the male parts of the plant that we want to take off before they produce pollen, so we don't worry about accidentally selfing this plant instead of making a hybrid. So what we're left with here is, let me see if I can show you this better, is just the style, the pistil, and the stigma. Stigma is the end of the style where you're going to put the pollen eventually. The style is this thin area, this thin piece right here. When you're emasculating, it's very easy to break that style, so you have to be very careful not to bump it, to grab it with the forceps or your fingernails. Just make sure that it all stays intact. And once you have that, you have completed the emasculating process. But in order for us to be able to find this again later, when we want to pollinate, we're going to put a string around it so that we know when we come back through here tomorrow, and we always want to pollinate the next day, not the same day, because it gives the plant a little time to fully mature that stigma and be receptive to the pollen. So never do pollinating on the same day unless there's no chance that you're going to be able to do it the next day. For instance, on a Friday, if we have flowers, we occasionally will emasculate and pollinate on the same day, especially if there's a particular line that hasn't been very productive, we don't have enough takes, or we need a lot of fruit from it. We'll give it a shot, because by Monday those flowers will be too far gone. So we want to be able to take whatever possibilities we can get when we get them. But as a general rule, we emasculate on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and we pollinate on Wednesdays and Fridays. So that's emasculating, and we will move next into pollinating tomorrow. Tomorrow, so that we will be able to complete the cycle. Thank you. Oh, and so today our objectives that we covered were understanding what the colors of the ribbons mean, and I'm demonstrating how to emasculate flowers to make them ready for pollinating and creating hybrids. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to learn how to extract pollen from flowers that have come from the field. Well, actually, in this case, they came from one of the plants in the breeding bench that we needed extra pollen for, and they weren't dropping well in the breeding bench, so we took the flowers off to do it here. So here are the flowers we have available to us, and what we do is we help open up the end of the flower by just cutting the tip off, and that just is going to help get that pollen to find a way out of that flower and drop into our receptacle that we're going to have. So we just cut the tips of all those off, and then we grab one of our little gel caps. Just simple thing, easy to handle and to use in the breeding bench when we're in there. And then I'm just going to write the number for this particular pollen on the capsule. So it's really tiny, but it's there. It's to help make sure that nothing gets mixed up. We often have more than one pollen tube, and here's our pollen tube that we're eventually going to put it in. And sometimes when you have multiple ones, you might have the tendency to forget what capsule goes in which tube, but if you write it on both things, you can't mess it up. So we're going to take our capsule, we're going to open it up. So it's just the little bottom of it sitting here. And then we are going to take our forceps. One forceps I use to hold the flower. And I will turn it over, and I will try to tap out whatever pollen is in there. Now, one of the reasons why we took these flowers off is because they weren't dropping very well. And I can see this one is not doing so great, but there is some in there, and I'll show you that in a second. So we just do that for each one of them, and try to get out as much pollen that we have in there as possible. And this just taps it out. try not to get all these extra little pieces of things in there. So, I wish I could show you how this pollen falls out when it's very loose in there, because it almost is like falling out of a salt shaker. But I don't know if you can see. You see the little white film that's at the bottom of this capsule? That's all pollen from this particular plant that we want to put onto another plant in order to make the proper hybrid. So now that we've got the pollen in there, we just close it back up. We put it in our proper tube. Now this tube has got dry ride in the bottom to help keep it from getting too moist in there, and some cotton just to keep the capsule away from the dry ride. And then we'll take this and we'll put it in our refrigerator until we need it on pollination day. So that's a simple and easy way to get our pollen that we need for the breeding bench. So the next step will be going into the breeding bench and getting the pollen to drop from the plants that are in there, and then we could actually pollinate each of those plants that we emasculated the other day. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.